Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has stressed that any EU plan to use frozen Russian assets to aid Ukraine must strictly follow international law and protect Eurozone stability. The European Commission's proposal would allow governments to utilize up to 185 billion euros from these assets in 2026 to 2027 amid falling US support for Kyiv. Paris Louvre Museum reopened now, 3 days after the thieves stole historic jewels worth an estimated 88 million euros, which is $102 million. Visitors have now returned to the world-famous museum as authorities continue investigating the high-profile heist. Taiwan's defense ministry has announced plans to deepen military cooperation with the United States through strategic dialogues, reciprocal visits, and joint exercise observations to safeguard regional stability. The move comes amid growing Chinese military pressure, with Beijing conducting normalized joint combat patrols. Poland has accused a Ukrainian national of spying for Russia after he allegedly shared photos and coordinates of Polish military infrastructure with a Russian speaker. Prosecutors have said that the suspect, detained with 30 grams of drugs, expressed pro-Russian views amid rising tensions in the region. Slovakia will likely support the EU's 19 sanctions package against Russia if its demands on energy, car makers, and electricity prices are met, Prime Minister Robert Fico has said. Fico plans to discuss the issues with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz ahead of the EU Leaders Summit on Thursday, as Brussels continues to address the war in Ukraine and European defense. The anticipated Putin-Trump summit in Budapest is on hold after Russia rejected a ceasefire proposal following the postponement of a Rubio-Lavrov meeting. Meanwhile, a report by the International Service for Human Rights revealed that China and Russia have repeatedly sought to defund UN human rights programs over the past 5 years. Russian strikes on Kyiv targeting energy facilities killed 2 and ignite fires across nearly half the city's districts. Ukrainian officials say the Putin-Trump summit is shelved after Moscow rejected a ceasefire amid escalating tensions between Russia, the US, and Ukraine. Paris's Louvre Museum has reopened now, 3 days after the thieves stole Now we start in the Middle East. On October 22nd, US Vice President JD Vance has highlighted the significant challenges ahead in the efforts to disarm Hamas and rebuild Gaza as part of the US-brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Speaking during a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem, Vance has described the task as very, very tough, stressing the need to both improve the living conditions for Gaza's civilians and eliminate Hamas as a threat to Israel. Vance has acknowledged the complexity of the situation, which involves balancing humanitarian efforts with security concerns. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Sasha Machta. She's a political commentator, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Sasha, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, thank you. Sasha, now what more can you tell us ever since we last time we talked? And is there anything that UAE can do to mediate between Israel and Hamas?
Yeah, so definitely, I think that the UAE has a significant role to play in mediation. The UAE is a partner to Israel. It's a regional partner, probably our strongest and best ally in the region, and a more moderate force. So the role they have to play is that of pushing for Hamas disarmament and also for rebuilding Gaza. Because in Israel, the assessment is that we'd rather have more moderate countries like the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia instead of Qatar or Turkey taking part in the forces on the ground or the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. And the UAE, we we hope that the UAE will join these efforts because they have a strong role to play, and we hope that they'll be a part of it.
And do you think any other countries will be joining Abraham Accords as well?
I think we've seen Indonesia looking like the most likely country to join recently. We saw in his speech at the UN his historic shalom, an open arm to the Israeli people and to the Israeli leadership. And we also heard some reports after the agreed ceasefire that Indonesia was planning on the president was planning to come to visit Israel. In the end, it didn't happen, but we think that it's closer than ever. And it would be significant. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, and we have no reason to not be partners, not be allies. We have so much we could work on together, economic opportunities, and we expect Indonesia to be one of the first to join. Also, Saudi Arabia, we see that Trump is really going to push on this. Biden tried in his first term, and October 7th, of course, stopped this historic opportunity. But now that the war is over, it looks like more likely for Saudi Arabia to also join the Abraham Accords. Syria, it's more complicated. We see some sort of security arrangement more possible, but it's so unstable, the situation in Syria, and we still have much to see on the stability of al-Juliani's regime. And when it comes to Lebanon, Hezbollah still has to fully disarm, and we hope that the Lebanese government will be a partner in that. But it's more complicated for now to see Lebanon join the accords as long as Hezbollah is not fully demilitarized and removed, or at least weakened, severely weakened.
Thank you, Sasha, for sharing that thorough analysis on this region. And lastly, what are the key challenges that, we just saw or heard JD Vance, and he acknowledged the challenges. What do you think are the challenges in this region that and its partners face, U.S. and its partners face in balancing humanitarian aid for Gaza with the security goal of disarming Hamas?
Yeah, so the largest threat right now we're facing is Hamas's not stepping down and not disarming. We still have bodies of hostages in Gaza in violation of the ceasefire, of the agreement. But the most challenging issue right now will be the disarmament of Hamas. The U.S. already said that they don't want forces on the ground. We didn't expect the U.S. to send forces on the ground, but unless there's enough pressure put on Hamas exerted by Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt, it's going to be very complicated to see Hamas actually following and carrying through with their part of the deal, which means leaving Gaza. So we're going to have to see enough pressure being put in for this to happen. And at the same time, bringing aid into Gaza is a necessity. The situation is catastrophic there. The humanitarian crisis caused by Hamas and inflicted on their own people is really tragic. And the challenge is the same challenge that we've had for the past 2 years. How do we bring in aid the Gazan people so desperately need while avoiding Hamas and not strengthening Hamas and providing them tools to rebuild? We also see that Hamas will use every last breath to stay in power. Hamas will use every last bullet. Hamas will use every last soldier. And that's why we also think the assessment is that Hamas has more bodies available than what they've been saying. They're just not releasing them in accordance to the deal. They want to extract as many concessions as possible from Israel in the hopes that the disarmament will be delayed and in the hopes that the international community won't pressure Hamas to disarm. So now is the time that we have to bring in aid to Gaza. We have at the same time pressure Hamas and only Hamas to disarm and to leave Gaza and to allow for the full implementation of the Trump plan.
Thank you, Sasha, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay in the topic in the region. The United Arab Emirates has called for a compromise to end the Middle East conflict. The advisor to the United Arab Emirates, President Anwar Gargash, urges security for Israel and a viable Palestinian state. He said that the recent Gaza ceasefire offers a key opportunity to change the course. Gargash has further stressed that old policies and maximalist views must be abandoned. He highlights the need to address the reality of two nationalisms competing for one land. He also warns that Israel's right-wing government must accept this fact. The UAE plays a crucial role in regional diplomacy. It has helped broker the Abraham Accords, normalizing ties with Israel. Gargash has warned Israeli annexation of the West Bank would be a red line. He urged focusing on making the U.S. plan to end the war in Gaza succeed. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates Minister of State, Lana Nuseibeh, has said that these accords aim to promote tolerance and peace. Let's have a look at what she has said.
In a state of the world where fragmentation is the norm, where you're seeing an erosion of one multilateral system that governs the international space, diplomatic agility and entrepreneurship is key in that space. And I think that's, I'm proud to have represented the foreign ministry for over 2 decades in this space, because I think where creative entrepreneurship in diplomacy is needed, the UAE has shown that, whether it's mediating over 5,000 prisoner exchanges between Russia and Ukraine, whether it's being, as Dr. Gargash has outlined, a key partner with the Arab region, but also with the United States and with Israel, using the Abraham Accords to help achieve this ceasefire in Gaza that was so desperately needed.
Go back to our guest discussion and we welcome Sasha Majda. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Sasha, for staying with us. Now, given the competing nationalisms described by UAE advisor, what do you think, what is realistic political solution which could acknowledge these realities while fostering coexistence and the history behind, which is still ongoing, of course?
Yeah, so first of all, regarding the UAE, let me just state that the UAE-Israel relations are strong. The UAE-Israel relations are probably the strongest alliance we have in the Middle East. Just recently, the UAE purchased land in Herzliya, Israel, to build its embassy. So we see that this is a permanent relationship and their input really matters to us. So addressing the claim of two competing nationalisms, there's no reason these nationalisms need to compete. At the end of the day, the Palestinians have been offered territory, they've been offered a state multiple times throughout history, and it's their rejectionism and maximalistic desires that have probably postponed a solution being reached years ago. So the doctrine should be maximum Israeli security and maximum control of the Palestinians' own lives, that they should have control of their lives, they should have less interactions with Israeli soldiers, they should have as much determination, self-determination, without giving up our security control. At the end of the day, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, it looks over, the hilltops overlook all of Tel Aviv, it overlooks the center of Israel. It's a small territory, and we can't just unilaterally grant a Palestinian state. The Palestinian state will need to come through, if it ever comes, through reforms, through de-radicalization, through demilitarization, because as we see, unfortunately, the leading Palestinian polls show Hamas still the most popular group in the West Bank. So that's not possible to just grant a state at this period. It's going to have to take certain reforms and de-radicalization, because even if the PA were to take a state right now, it would probably be overthrown by Hamas, as already happened in Gaza. We can't repeat the mistakes of the past, but we must acknowledge that the only path forward is a path where Palestinians can live in peace, can live with control of their lives, but without giving up any ounce of our own security. And I think that that's what the UAE understands. They understand that Israeli security is a must. Israel can't just make concessions, and it's the Palestinians that will have to go through a process of de-radicalization and prove that they can be a viable neighbor. So that's our hope, that we'll have peace, and we hope that the Palestinians will abandon their desire and their years of terror and look for a future of peace and coexistence.
Thank you very much, Sasha Majda, for sharing that insight as a political commentator from Jerusalem. Now we stay on this topic. Recent footage from Gaza shows humanitarian aid arriving as the ongoing ceasefire holds in the conflict-ridden region. Trucks carrying food, medical supplies, and essential resources enter areas previously cut off due to hostilities, providing much-needed relief to civilians. The ceasefire has enabled relief agencies to safely coordinate distribution, ensuring access to vulnerable groups, including children, the elderly, and families displaced by recent conflict. Authorities and international organizations emphasize the importance of maintaining the truce to allow uninterrupted humanitarian operations. Meanwhile, the situation in Gaza remains fragile. The delivery of supplies highlights a crucial step in reducing human suffering and supporting communities during this challenging period. Observers note that ongoing monitoring and cooperation among local and international agencies is essential to sustain these relief efforts. Now we move on to our next news. Syrian government forces have launched a major operation against jihadists entrenched in a camp near the Turkish border in northwest Syria. The offensive aims to capture members of the group Firqatul Ghuraba, wanted by the French government, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Clashes have erupted after midnight and are reportedly ongoing. The camp houses the group led by Omar Omsen, also known as Omar Diaby, who is a former criminal turned preacher. He was designated as an international terrorist by the United States in 2016. Diaby is wanted on a French arrest warrant, and French authorities have requested the handover of 2 nationals from the group. This operation comes amid ongoing instability following the Syrian civil war, which began in 2011 and has killed over 500,000 people. Now we move on to our next news. China says it's maintaining close communication with the United States ahead of a planned meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. At a press briefing in Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun has said that the head of state diplomacy plays an irreplaceable role in guiding China-U.S. relations, though he offered no further details about the upcoming meeting. This comes as Trump recently announced that he would meet President Xi in South Korea within 2 weeks to discuss trade issues, including tariffs on Chinese goods. The talks are expected to take place on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea, as both sides navigate trade tensions and the broader geopolitical frictions. Let's in fact listen into what Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun has said.
元首外交对中美关系发挥着不可替代的战略引领作用。中美两国元首保持着密切的交往和沟通。关于你提到的具体问题，我目前没有可以提供的信息。
Now for this discussion, we welcome Andrew K. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from Cairo. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this news, how critical is direct head of state diplomacy? And especially now, what do you think this timing, if this was to happen, the meeting between Trump and Xi would happen, what do you think, what would be the effects and in resolving ongoing trade tensions between US and China? Andrew, you might be muted here, sorry. Andrew, I think you might be muted over here. Andrew? We still cannot hear you, Andrew. Andrew, we still cannot hear you. I kindly request for you to unmute if possible. China has said that it's maintaining close communications with the United States ahead of a planned meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping. At a press briefing in Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Goh Jia-kun has said that the head of state diplomacy plays an irreplaceable role in guiding China-U.S. relations, though he has offered no further details about the upcoming meeting. This comes as Trump recently announced that he would meet President Xi in South Korea within 2 weeks to discuss trade issues, including tariffs on Chinese goods. The talks are expected to take place on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea as both sides navigate trade tensions and broader geopolitical frictions. Now for this discussion, we go back to Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us again. Andrew, going back to my same question, how critical is this in Goh Jia-kun's words, resolving on how critical is the leaders meeting face to face?
Well, I think that both the United States and China have tested their mutual resolves. On the side of the United States through tariffs and other restrictions and exclusion from high-end chips, and also urging its allies to do the same against China. And China has now found a very effective countermeasure in terms of its dominance and mastery of the essential rare earth elements which China is used in all sorts of products, including fighter jets. So I think that both sides are now looking for some sort of a accommodation. But I don't think that this is the end game yet. I think that the United States still think that they can somehow bend China to its will. But China is perfectly confident, not only in terms of its mastery of the rare earth elements, but also in the success in pivoting its trade to the Global South. And in fact, during the past couple of months, China's export has in fact increased. Overall export has increased, even though its export to the United States has gone to zero. Because the United States, even though it's the largest economy in the world, it only accounts for something less than 10% of China's overall exports. So I think that this is there's more anxiety, urgency on the side of the United States than China. But I think that both sides are trying to seek out some areas for possible accommodation.
And Andrew, building on that, in what ways could trade discussions at the APEC summit influence the broader geopolitical relationship between these two countries beyond just economic issues?
The United States started off by thinking that, as I said, somehow bending China to its will, and also thwarting China's rise because it's seen as an essential threat to American dominance. But having tested the result on the side of China, I think that the Trump administration is beginning to realize that it's going to suffer even more before even any hope of stopping China's rise. I think that the situation is becoming increasingly clear to the United States that it's going to seek some sort of accommodation, possibly in terms of a personal meeting between President Xi and President Trump.
Andrew, thank you very much for joining us and sharing that insight. That was Andrew K.P. Long as a China strategist. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. President has put the meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on hold, citing that he does not wish to waste a meeting in response. The Kremlin has said that nobody wants to waste time. The Kremlin further added that ample preparations are necessary for a Trump-Putin summit, and it would take time. They also stated that any pause in Ukraine peace requires intervention from the highest level. Furthermore, the Kremlin confirmed that President Putin would not be traveling to South Africa for the G20 summit. However, Russia will be represented at the highest level. Now we move on to our next news. On Wednesday, the Verkhovna Rada has approved in the first reading the draft state budget of Ukraine for 2026 with 256 deputies voting in favor. The budget will undergo further review, incorporating conclusions and proposals before being returned to Parliament. The final vote on the complete budget is expected by mid-month. Clarifications and additional materials may lead to changes during this process. After coordination between departments, the budget will be resubmitted to take effect only after all procedures and approvals are completed. Now we stay in Europe. In Lithuania, normal operations have resumed at Vilnius Airport and 2 Belarus border crossings following a temporary overnight shutdown. The closures were prompted by a security alert when dozens of helium balloons reportedly carrying contraband cigarettes entered Lithuanian airspace from Belarus, disrupting flights and border traffic. According to the National Crisis Management Center, around 30 flights were affected with over 4,000 passengers impacted. This marks the second such incident this month involving smuggler balloons near the capital. The intrusion comes amid a broader pattern of aerial disruption across Europe, including recent drone-related disturbances at major airports in Copenhagen, Munich, and elsewhere in the Baltic region. Authorities are continuing to monitor the situation closely as concerns grow over the use of such methods to bypass border controls. My colleague Piaman has had the opportunity to speak with some parliamentarians gathered in Geneva. Let's have a look.
Hello and welcome viewers, I'm Pia and you're watching NewsX World special coverage of the 151st Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union in Geneva. Joining me on the broadcast at the moment is a very special guest, Margareta Cederfelt. She is a Member of Parliament from Sweden. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. At the outset, this is a gathering where MPs from more than 183 nations are currently present. How do you see the IPU as a platform for promoting a dialogue and democracy and ensuring better parliamentary functioning across the world?
IPU is very, very important. It's the largest, actually the only parliamentarian forum where all countries are members. All countries are welcome. And we are the parliamentarian side of United Nations. So I see it as mostly important. We have 2 General Assembly every year. And for the winter, the autumn, are we here in Geneva? Then we are in different member countries.
Absolutely. And speaking of the IPU, how's your experience been so far at the 151st Assembly?
I think IPU is really important because it's a forum where we meet with parliamentarians from all over the world. A possibility to exchange views on peace building, capacity and business, civil society, of course lawmaking as well, and democracy, human rights. Everything, no topic is forbidden. It's our duties as parliamentarians to work to support a better world.
Absolutely. You've mentioned human rights. That's the underlying theme of this very IPU edition, the 151st edition. And we are seeing that there are over 120 humanitarian crises across the world. 310 million people have been affected by this. How do you think the IPU can then galvanize support for all of these people?
First of all, by debate, by listening to each other, changing views that we can bring with us back home to our national parliament. for legislation, for agreement, for continued international agreement, but also to exchange view on, for example, we have had a resolution here on that will be adopted tomorrow, I hope, about illegal adoption of children. That's very, very important. No children should be risk to be illegal adopted. But also, let me mention, there is an emergency item that's produced. I think it's fantastic, with several countries together. It's Thailand, it's Chile, it's Argentina, it's Poland, and it's Sweden. And it's about security on cyber security, but also hybrid warfare. And I think this shows that we can cooperate between countries all over the world. It doesn't matter when we find a topic that we have in common, that is not bound to national borders.
Absolutely. You've talked about the cyber realm. We all know that the world is becoming increasingly digitized. The access to new technologies such as artificial intelligence is also being democratized. You know, we see children using AI. We see the elderly also using AI, from complicated deep research to probably even measuring your own vegetable list or your shopping list for the day as well. But there's a flip side as well with deep fakes now. What do you think are the challenges when it comes to AI and policy making and sort of balancing the fact that artificial intelligence is a boon but also a bane?
I totally agree. I can see the positive sides. It's making life easier. But the other part is that what ground do the AI use when it makes its answer? Where do it get its information? How is the information received? And also, I have heard that there are people who give AI human rights and see them as a friend. For me, AI is a computer, it's a program, and it should be treated like that. But we are also, as politicians, to not only have to look on the business field, to the development of technology, also on the ethic part of the AI. As you mentioned here, how can AI be used? What is behind the various program? And what are the risks? Is there a risk to see AI as your friend? Where is then the human perspective? And this do we need to have a debate on. I know that the debate on how to use social media have just started. And I think the next topic is to continue the debate about artificial intelligence.
Sweden, as we know it, is a very technologically advanced country as well. So I wanted to understand, how has Sweden sort of incorporated AI as far as governance is concerned?
We are working on artificial intelligence. I would say that the development goes so fast, so it's difficult for politicians to be in the front line. We can't be in the front line. We are always, as politicians, and that's not only Sweden, it's worldwide, it's just to admit, a little bit behind. But that's also a good thing, because then we can see what is needed to regulate. So we don't start to make laws before we have seen something what's needed to be done. But let me also say, Sweden is a high developed country with a lot of technology and also startup and innovation. But I must also say that India is another country with a high level of technology, a high number of very well qualified engineers. And I say this because I believe strongly that Sweden and India can cooperate more on this topic.
Absolutely. Speaking about Sweden and India and the equation, where do you see this headed next?
I think, if you mean the Sweden and India, I think we can cooperate on a lot of things. India is the world's largest democracy with more than 1.2 billion people. And you have performed an election. I think this is amazing. And we can cooperate both on democracy issues, but also on business sectors, on humanitarian sectors, because India is a country that's developing and is very soon a middle-income country. And I think that shows that India are on the right pathway. And also Sweden is working in similar directions. So I think we should benefit of each other. And let me also say that in Sweden, Tata have established business in Sweden, and the oldest Swedish company in India, Sandvik, have been there for more than 60 years outside of Pune. And this shows that there is already very tight relation between Sweden and India. And I am actually chairperson of the Swedish-Indian Friendship Group in the parliament. And I am so grateful for the Indian embassy in Sweden, because your ambassador will come to the parliament and we will have a dialogue with all invited MPs about the relation between Sweden and India, because we can develop our relation much more.
We're all smiles right now. Coming to a more lighter question, have you ever tried Indian food? If so, what's your favorite dish?
I like almost everything, but I must admit that some spices are a little bit too strong for me. But I like the paneer very much. Oh yes, it's delicious. And talk about the dosas. All the different kind of dosas is amazing. Indian cuisine is very, very good. And there are several Indian restaurants in Stockholm as well, all with good food, nice restaurants, and Indian food is popular in Sweden. I hope that Swedish food is known in India. It's not the same variety of tastes, but I hope Swedish food will find its way to India as well.
Yes, and pop culture as well. A lot of Swedish artists are very popular, whether it's Zara Larsson or Tuvalu. Coming back to a little more serious conversation, we've talked about artificial intelligence, but there's another glaring problem of tomorrow, climate change and global warming. Sweden is at the forefront of incorporating green technology, of harnessing energy, renewable energy in a manner where it's setting an example for the world. We're at the IPU where countries are exchanging best practices. So in that context, what is it that the world can learn from Sweden, and what is it that Sweden would like to take as a lesson from the